let's move into some technical stuff. I want to talk to some technical stuff now, right? And
Yep. Yeah.
stuff that we can kind of share. I've sent to you 4 topic areas, right? Which I don't know if you looked at, but I did. Anyways, one thing I've been hearing you talk about lately, right? And it seems to be, I'm not going to say the flavor of you, but you seem to be talking a lot about it lately, is braking mechanisms and, controlling the deceleration. Because I think a lot of people don't think about this. I was explaining to a student the other day, club head speed is what we're talking about, not club speed. So to get club head speed, you need the grip to decelerate to make the club head faster. It's not club speed, it's club head speed. Anyways, it's a conversation I find myself having a bit. But can you talk to me about braking mechanisms, what it means, where the braking parts are within the golf swing?
Yeah. Yeah. So the way I think about it, that you want the energy transfer happening, at the moment of contact.
Mm-hmm.
And then once the ball is off the face, you can't transfer any more energy into the ball. So the way I look at, the rest of the golf swing is, slowing things down. So, I think of sort of your, how you're creating acceleration and what you're doing in the backswing sequence and the downswing sequence to, get the speed out to the club head. But then from there, how do we control the slowing down of this thing so that we, don't have this weight kind of tugging on us, over here on this side of the swing and pulling us out of balance and all those kinds of things. And so, you start learning about the braking mechanisms, and, those are essentially designed to help you control the deceleration. And I look at how pitchers train and baseball, you don't want to have, whatever Tommy John surgery on your elbow. You want to, they actually train the deceleration of their throw. Just going through some of the braking mechanisms that I talk about, one of them is the ground. The ground is a braking mechanism. So basically the club head is going to hit the ball and then it's going to hit the ground, and the ground is going to, stabilize the face a little bit and slow the club head down a little bit. So then it makes it a little bit easier to control the weight around that corner coming out of impact if, you take a little bit of a divot. But then how do you control deceleration when you start to get to the longer, shallower clubs where you're taking less of a divot? So you have these sort of other braking mechanisms that you're utilizing. So the right foot is another one that we look at, so when I was at Tathata Golf, I think we called it an anchor, but I think in some other circles they'll call it a brake. But essentially, just the right foot releasing and how much. And, I had a post the other day on, Tom Lehman. You kind of see Tom Lehman at the finish of his golf swing, his right foot's, really not that released. Kenny Perry, guys like that. Because, if you're swinging out to the right, especially, you're going to need to use that right foot to kind of help you, slow the weight down, because you get a different experience when you're swinging out to the right in terms of the effect of centrifugal force. So, those guys are going to use that right foot a little differently than maybe someone who's like a Brooks Koepka or someone, like opening things up a little bit differently. So
for the
then
person
you've got,
listening, you would say what the look of what this braking looks like through this trail foot is it's got the banking look about it. Is that what you're saying? It looks like it's banking more, so it's moving more internally, not the heel coming up and spinning.
Yeah. And then just where and when the foot releases and how much it releases, and, basically that being related to how much the pelvis is turning, so
yes,
if I'm sort of, Tom Lehman and I'm swinging out to the right and I'm keeping my path out to the right, then this right foot, might not release as much. But if I let this go more, then that's going to respond, so using that right foot as a break. And because there's nothing worse than a draw player, I think, being over rotated at the finish of their golf swing. That just, I think they can hit hooks that way, So the best draw players I see are really, really good with the braking mechanism. So the right foot would be one of them, and then the other ones I would look at would be the left wrist. The left wrist is a big one, and this kind of gets into if I'm using a longer follow through arc versus a shorter follow through arc, if I'm using a longer club versus a shorter club.
Yeah.
In my experience, the best players that I've seen, in person in competition, I've played with like Spieth and Cantlay and Harris English and guys like that, like in their group in competition. And I noticed that great players tend to flight their more lofted clubs a little bit more down.
Mm-hmm.
Control those clubs, control the trajectory, control the distance. They're not swinging 100% and floating the ball up in the air a lot. They're really under control with the shorter clubs, and then with the longer clubs, they have the ability to kick the trajectory up in the air and hit the ball pretty hard. So the follow through arcs and how you use your left wrist, I think, is a huge part of it. And so if I was long arcing, so what I like to do, if I'm hitting a wedge, I like to take a little bit of a divot, and I like to kind of shallow out the wedges with width, by lengthening out the arc a little bit, getting a little more passive in the distal muscles.
So when you say shallow it out, you're saying keeping the club down on the flat plane for longer.
Yeah, just kind of, just a little bit, just lengthen out the arc a little bit to help, the dynamic loft a little bit, to bring the trajectory down a little bit, to, hit those clubs well and flight those golf clubs. So I kind of prefer lengthening the arc out a little bit more so with, the 8-iron down to the wedges sort of thing. And then, the other clubs too, if you're trying to hit lower trajectories, obviously. But in my experience, as you get to the longer golf clubs, they're longer. The club head's further away from you, shallower plane, club head's going a lot faster. So if I try to long arc, with like a 3-wood with no divot, that becomes really challenging because the momentum's going to try to long arc it anyway, and then the club's longer to begin with. So in my experience with the longer clubs, especially if I'm trying to kick the trajectory up, I'm not going to want to long arc it because if I don't take a divot, it's going to be hard to slow this thing down. The momentum's going to pull me with it, and the club's longer to begin with. So I feel like with the longer golf clubs, you can maybe feel a little bit of that through here, but then you got to start, cutting the radius in half twice with the left wrist and with the elbows to help kind of slow things down and stay in balance.
Let me ask you 2 questions there, right? And I think it's a good topic to talk about. There is, I'll use it a lot. So for the person with the draw player, what you're saying there, right? If you're trying to draw the golf ball successfully, is if you're hitting, if you're facing the flag, right? So let's use facing the flag as 0, right? And we'll call it 12 o'clock. If you want to try and practice hitting a proper draw, kind of finishing with your body looking at like 2 o'clock, would you kind of agree with that?
I guess, yeah. I mean, yeah.
But not over rotated. So kind of looking at 2 o'clock there, and then kind of understanding and feeling how that right foot is working to get you there. Because when you see with the recreational golfer who has spun out a lot, we would talk about the over the top move that everyone's quite familiar with, right? Well, the club moving out too early and coming across the ball. That person has spun out and over rotated too early. And you'll see that heel kind of come up, and they're facing really, really far left of the flag. Sometimes they'll even fall over in their momentum kind of work there. So I think a fantastic one is to kind of feel like you're just finishing in a bit more right side bend and body facing to the right of the flag. Do you reckon?
I feel like if I'm trying to keep, the baseline shifted out to the right, P5 is kind of a key spot, where's this left arm at 5? And if I'm trying to keep my baseline shifted more to the right, my left arm is going to be a little more in at 5. And then basically from P5, I'm just feeling pure arm speed,
Yeah.
That would be kind of the main difference I would see between, the more rotational type golf swing versus the more, draw type golf swing.
Yeah, it's so much. There's so much value in when you get to P5, right? I say to majority of people is I don't think you've got much choice after that. You want to be ready.
Right.
You want to be ready.
Right.
You got to be ready by P5, don't you reckon?
Yeah, so that's one spot that you definitely want to check in on, and that's one key checkpoint in the golf swing that I definitely look at is where's that left arm at 5? Because if I'm trying to hit a like a pull cut, I'm gonna start shifting this thing more out
Yeah.
and then down, you know. But if I'm trying to keep it out to the right, I'm gonna be a little more in here and then just kind of let my hands and arms go. And yeah, a little more Tom Lehman type vibe.
Yeah, so people who are like listening and were at left arm level to the last level to the ground in the downswing, and if you just kind of think about where your hands are, look at your glove hand in relationship to kind of the midline on your body, or even just the baseline of the shot, right? And see where it is. You'll see a lot of slices that lead arm will be out quite a fair bit, and you'll see people who have got
Yeah.
a bit more of a push pattern. That lead arm will be inward a little bit more towards kind of midline of the chest, like a Roy McIlroy with the driver, like really deep in there, right? Like I think he's the biggest one to look at who's on that real draw bias type of shape. So right foot there. And then when you talk about cutting the radius in half, you're talking about, or doubling it, I think you mentioned there, is you're talking about the lead arm and the wrists as they fold. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, so just kind of just after impact, the way I sort of think about it, my arms are in front of me at setup, and then they're kind of to the side of me in the backswing. They're to the side of me. They're even a little bit to the side of me at impact, and then they sort of officially get back in front of me. I would say around P7.5. So that's kind of where I'm really feeling the weight. I got the weight. It's like what mass on the end of a fulcrum. So you got the weight going real fast around that corner, and it starts to kind of feel heavy. So if I'm late on the rehinge, I feel that momentum kind of pulling the right side of the body kind of up and out of the shot a little bit. So you kind of get that high right shoulder
Yeah.
type look. And when I see a lot of the great ball strikers, of all time, they still have that right shoulder a little lower than that left shoulder at the finish of the golf swing, pretty level in the pelvis, but there's a little tilt there.
Yeah.
And so in my experience, when I go from sort of unhinging to quickly rehinging, I can get the club lighter and I can control it, control the slowing down of it. So, if Tiger Woods is braking and controlling deceleration with a driver, you'd see kind of this stuff,
Yeah.
I
Okay.
still think that's controlling deceleration. And I
Yeah.
think that's how you have to control deceleration when you don't have the ground there to help you slow the club head down. If you're ripping a driver, the ball's teed up and you're going as hard as you can, I still look at Tiger as being in control of the deceleration when he recoils.
Yeah.
Um, it's just a different experience when you have the ground as a brake versus when you don't have the ground as a brake.
Like Mr. Norman as well. But
Yeah.
you spoke there about that's interesting about that speed there with Tiger and how he has the quick recall, right? And I read something here, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit because it's such a long time ago. Was about how Rory's was actually at his fastest around like P6, and he was getting slower at the ball. You know what I mean? So he was working on getting that speed out later because he was getting it out too early. Do you know what I mean? So
Mm,
he was getting too fast too early and slowing down through impact, and then learning on how to delay that speed, right? And then obviously because he has to think about braking, right? So it's going to be coming a bit faster post impact.
right.
So then he's got to
Right.
start. So if he's going to delay the fast point, right? The fastest point's going. He's going to have to start to learn on how to control the deceleration, right? Because it's going to be
Yeah,
different.
I noticed. Well, what I've been noticing too with Tommy Fleetwood, when I watched Tommy and Rory battling, and I think it was in Dubai,
Yep.
one of the events. I'm looking at Tommy, and he's very. I think he's starting to really get some really 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 good information. I'm not
Yep.
sure who he works with or who he's talking to, but I've noticed from Tommy lately, especially with his driver, is I'm starting to see kind of that both elbows bent, both wrists rehinged, kind of Nicholas Watson
Mm.
type look, and then I don't see him high right shoulder and over rotated in the mid axis because I think he's doing a really good job of what I call kind of catching the throw, So
Yep.
like with driver, I don't think you want to shallow out like this way because then you're going to get real steep at
Yeah,
impact. I
leftovers.
mean, you got a shallower club, and if you're on plane, you're on plane. But with driver, I'm feeling release back here,
Mhm,
and
mhm,
I'm
mhm.
feeling shallow more through and out of impact, and then I'm catching the weight with my braking mechanism. So with my
Interesting.
extension, with my wrists and elbows, I'm trying to get the thing going and then slow it down well over here. So shallowing out the driver, I think, would be an interesting conversation to have because I've been noticing people trying to get really, really shallow in the shaft plane here, but then wondering why their face is really open at impact. Well, if the handle is really high or really far forward
Yeah.
at impact, then that face is open to whatever path you swing on. So then you get guys kind of like deciding to strengthen their grip or bow their left wrist to shut the
Yeah.
face, and now we got more problems when you could have just learned where the release point is and how to
Mhm.
close the face by squaring it up and keeping the handle down through impact.
And it's interesting when you talk about late shallowing, right? People, coaches will understand that when a shallowing move is if you look at the relationship between the sternum and the center of the pelvis, right? And when you're talking about adding speed or you're accelerating or pushing out of the ground out of your lead side with your lead leg, right? You're going to start tilting that and adding like right side bend, right? So that relationship, then that sternum is going to get more behind the pelvis. So you're doing that quite late, like about P5 onwards. So then you're really getting to shallow it because you're working hard there. Where if you've been getting Gucci from the top and you're doing that, lead arms out, I don't know where you are because the arms have got to come back down. They're not coming down. So the club's not getting shallow. Like I got a video to kind of share with people is like the number one tip to shallow your club, extend your right elbow. Fuck no. Like just literally just, there you go. It's shallow now. It's there.
Right.
Extend your right elbow, hold the wrist. It's not
Yeah,
anyways.
and you have a 4 or 5 year period where the industry's basically trying to take away the right elbow and they're trying to take away the extension, and I really feel like the main difference between CP and CF is just kind of how you're working on the handle. It's not that different.
Interesting. Yes, and yeah, just try and tell me a sport where I have a throwing action going on and we're trying to not extend the trail arm. Shooting a basketball, um, serving a tennis ball, pitching a baseball. Tell me
Well,
one.
and that was always an interesting one, right? Because it's like I do see this as a little more bent at impact if someone's,
Mhm. Yes,
more opened up, but it's kind of where the right shoulder is in relation to the ball. So if I'm,
100%.
steepening my tilts and getting things really opened up, then yeah, this is going to look more bent at impact. And it's going to straighten out later in the swing sequence. Then if my right shoulder's back here and I'm swinging out to the right, it might look a little different. And then obviously you can move where the ball is on the arc.
Yeah,
But
but
either
the
way, the
real
right straighten
yes.
it out.
So if we call the trail arm at 180 degrees, right? Like completely extend 180, and you might see someone who's like at 160, right? Or whatever they might be at the point of impact. They're at 160, but 0.15 a second ago they were at 90.
Right,
So they've unloaded 70 to get to
right,
there. And B,
right,
we've got to look at the relationship of the right shoulder and how low it is to the ground, and the reason to why it is at 160. It's not there because they're holding on. It's
right,
there due to the space between them and the ball, and
right,
they're in their unloading phase. They're not. It's not a holding on phase. It's an unloading phase. I
right.
think
And
that's a
then in
still
that,
image.
you got guys, hyperextending their right elbow going back and then going too linear with the takeaway.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden the weight starts going into the ball of your right foot. And then you start pulling the mass in on you in the transition region. So now you collapse all your width. Now your elbows start to separate. Now you get steep in transition. So you never establish your tilts properly to begin with, and then you can't sustain the width because you had the width in
Mm,
the wrong spot. So then
yeah.
you can't get the club shallow. So then someone's going to tell you to do all this stuff, even more for your brain to have to coordinate when you practice once a week. So
Mm.
I don't know if golf's as hard as it's being taught to be.
I tell you what, like, I know we're going to have some rabbit holes here and just kind of rambling. I hope people listening are kind of keeping up with us. I tell you where the golf can just sound so simple, right? And look, and just people need to understand how simple it is. If the exercise I love to show people to really break it down for them is stand up tall in speaking posture, hold your lead arm out in front of you directly in front of your shoulder, right? Like that there, right? For people watching on the YouTube. And then grip the club underneath it like that. So the shaft is now parallel to the ground. Then turn 90 degrees and then just fucking side bend and you have a backswing, right? And then all you got to do from there is unload your right arm into the ball. Like,
It's not backflip on a balance beam, you know?
when people, I do it to people, they go, is that the backswing? I'm like, pretty much. There's a little bit of arm lift, but that's it. Don't overcomplicate it.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's a rabbit hole. Talk to me about the training of P3 to P9. Before I did my study, you know, the beautiful thing about me with my learning, Alex, to kind of share with you is that I learned a lot of this stuff by kind of myself through my own training, right?
Yeah.
And kind of got it quantified through my extra curriculum training, if it's through, Morad or whatever, where there was a system applied to something and I kind of got to learn about it. I used to have a number one swing and a number two swing. Number one swing was to hips, and number two swing was lead arm parallel to right arm parallel, right? And which I've soon found out, many moons ago, that it's P3 to P9, right? And that's where I had a lot of my students kind of working prior to me even finding that out.
Yeah.
I still have it saved in my file, my library as number two swing. I've got to change it. But can you tell me the importance of training P3 to P9 and what it is?
Yeah. It's basically just a half golf swing.
Yep.
So I like to get people, in that drill, what I try to do is I try to get people feeling how to use their power accumulators,
Yes.
So the hinging and the unhinging of the right elbow, I think that's one that's really sort of underutilized.
Yep.
The throwing arm, you see people trying to throw like in all kinds of weird ways, so just kind of the bending and the straightening of that arm, I think is a good feel there, because you're kind of with the 3 to 9 drill, you're paying attention to the right arm flexion sequence, you're paying attention to the right elbow positions, you're paying attention to the right arm pressure points, kind of where the gap is being created and how it's being closed. So in my opinion, I think a lot of people get real wide in both arms in the takeaway. And in the first half of their backswing, they put all their width there, and then they kind of lose it up at the top of the backswing. So trying to get people to stay a little more centered and establish their tilts earlier in the golf swing, so that they can feel like they can keep stretching things out later in the backswing and sustain the width a little better, and stay a little bit shallower up there. Because like great golf swings that I see have tilts, have width, and have depth at the same time, So if you can get those three things blended together well, then you can, swing like Sam Snead or Ben Hogan or someone like that. And when you look at Snead or Palmer or Hogan, those guys, the right arm flexion sequence starts earlier in the backswing. I don't see these guys going back like this as much. The right arm kind of starts bending a little bit earlier, which, in my experience, kind of helps the lead side kind of work down and the trail side kind of work up and establish those tilts. So with the P3 to 9 drill, I'm trying to get people, initially, you're just trying to get them to have awareness of just kind of where their arms are in space. I mean, that's the first thing with that drill is most people think they're stopping at P3 and then they're, all the way at P4 or P3 and a half, they think they're at 3. So the first bit of that drill is just kind of getting people to, build a half golf swing. And I tell them they can get a 2-for-1 because we can work on this drill with your wedges first. Because like when I got to Oregon State, the coaches wanted us to have a quarter swing, a half swing, a 3/4 swing, a full swing. Yeah. They wanted us to be off speed. So I'll have them basically take their 60 degree, their 56, their 52, their pitching wedge, and give me some P3 to 9 swings, and let's see how far the ball's carrying.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
now we know we've got some go-to yardages, and then we're indirectly working on our power accumulators, and we're developing some awareness of where our arms are in space, how to sync up our arms with our pivot, um, keep the radius more constant, things like that. Um, and if you can get them kind of building some go-to yardages as well simultaneously, then I think that's kind of a cool way to get a 2-for-1, because not only are we learning our power accumulators, how to get a more constant radius, how to get the low point under control, all those sorts of things. Um, Most people can't make a half golf swing. They struggle to make
Yeah.
a half golf swing. And if you're going like this in the takeaway, then yeah, you're going to kind of struggle to
So what?
use
Yeah.
hands and arms well.
When Alex says going like this, what he's saying there is about the one piece takeaway. So, when really both arms are really extended through the early stages of the golf swing, and some of the things he's showing there visually through the camera, if you're not watching on YouTube, is that um, when that stays really, really long there, Alex and I have spoken about this before many times, right? Is that when you start to bend that right arm, it's really difficult to control it because there's a lot of momentum already put into that right arm as it's staying really straight, and then it's got to try and catch it. But one thing I can share about P3 to P9, I'm interested to kind of hear your thoughts, is that I think especially dealing with a lot of athletes, um, I like to separate the golf swing into two entities, one being body pivot, the other one being the arms and the club structure. And I think a lot of athletes and a lot of people can really grasp the concept of moving the body pivot quite well pretty quickly. So let's say like tilting their shoulders, a 9-degree tilt with the mid iron, getting 40 degrees out of the pelvis, 90 degrees out of the chest in the backswing. I feel like most people can do that pretty quickly, right? That's got an athletic kind of sporting background to it, right? If you played a bit of any sport. I think one of the tricky things before when we're kind of downplaying how toughness of the golf swing is in that right arm and in that left arm, or particularly in that right arm when you're taking it to left arm level to the ground, is you've got a hinge joint in your wrist and you've got a hinge joint in your elbow. So I think working to P3 to left arm level in the ground in the backswing is a great training because it can teach you on how to control how much and how little to move those. So if you get someone who is really overloading in that elbow and really underloading in their wrists, and they got this kind of look, which is, the forearm looking at a 45-degree angle at 3, then that the right arm is too overloaded. They need to get that right arm unloaded and then add more to the wrist. And I think it really paints an easy picture for someone to organize their arms and club structure through that area. Do you kind of agree there as well?
Absolutely. And one thing that I've been noticing recently, Toby, is, there's a lot of those products on the market where you're kind of like trying to squeeze the ball between your arms, or you're trying to squeeze the ball between your wrists, or you're trying to keep the arms real tight and real together,
Interesting.
But when I see great players, I see that load happening dynamically in the swing. I
Yeah.
don't see it set up there at P1 and then trying to maintain it the whole way back. You know what I mean? When I
Interesting.
see Snead and Nicholas and Hogan and those guys setting up, their elbows are soft and wider at setup. And then as they load things, that's where they start to feel the elbows sort of squeezing together up there. Because where I want to feel the squeeze is more up here. Because if I can keep the width up in the second half of my backswing and keep my elbows close together, then I can get this thing planed out. And if I can get my hands and arms planed out, well, now I don't have to plane it with my body or with an early release. So
Yeah.
now all of a sudden I can do all these things in the downswing sequence properly because I've established my tilts, I've got some depth, and I've got the thing on plane. So from my perspective, I was always trying to get the hands and arms on plane so that I can actually get steep coming down and then shallow it at the bottom with my release and my extension late.
Yeah.
Because that's what I see from Tiger. I see, and great major champions, I don't know how shallow you want to get, if you're trying to hit out a US Open rough and stuff like that. So there's obviously a multitude of ways to shallow the club out. But I've been having people recently, because it's like I want to secure the grip. I want to secure the face. I want to make sure that I've got this thing secured, because I got to move this out of balance thing really fast, and I got to be correct within degrees. So I'm not trying to set my hands up necessarily loose. I want to make sure I got this thing under control. But then how do I simultaneously get the tension out of my arm lines? How do I get the tension out of my shoulder girdle? How do I get the tension out of my face, head, neck? Because this is where I need to be pliable.
Yeah.
And I want to sink the, I want to sink the weight down. I want to feel heavy in the lower body, and I want to sink the breath down here, because if I get real tense and tied up in my clavicles and in my chest, then I'm basically having a fight flight nervous system response standing over the ball, which most people are. So it starts with P0 to P1. What are we saying to ourselves, and how are we walking into this golf ball, and what are we feeling while we're standing over it, and getting the tension levels right in the mid axis so that you can actually load this stuff properly in the backswing sequence. I see so many people just so rigid and so locked out in their joints and up in their clavicles and tight in their face and tight in their jaws. And one of the ways you stretch out C0, 1, 2 is by like opening your mouth and looking up and sticking your tongue out.
Yeah.
So it's like you're trying to get tension out of here and let it sink down into the roots of the tree, and then get the branches feeling a little more, like Sam Snead said, like oily, that I can get this stuff loading properly.
I think what you say there is a good point. And when you talk about a lot of the stuff out there in the market about keeping the forearms kind of closely connected together at setup position, because what kept thinking through my mind when you're talking about there, right, is and I've never watched a game of baseball in my life, right? I've just seen people pitching a ball, right? But I think about a baseballer there, a pitcher. Is that what he's called? The guy that throws it? But as he's resting there, right, and he's resting, getting ready to pitch it, that arm, you see him, he's moving it around a little bit. He's not he's got that ball. He's not fully extended in that arm, which is if we both agree that the downswing is a throw of the right arm, right, at the ball, right, and we can say left as well, but it's more of it's like a pull, right? But I call it a throw of the right arm. Yeah. And if we both agree with that, and we want to look at other sports where they're throwing, how many of them are holding tension in that right arm at setup position, trying to keep something super tight together? And I think that's a really good way of you looking at that too, because I never really thought about it. But I'll always use the wording whenever I'm coaching someone, is I'll say soften the trail arm. I never say bend it. I say soften it.
Soften it. Yep. Agreed.
Nope. I'm just thinking about it now. I've no reason. I've just always said soften. I've never reasoned why, but I've used the word soften, not bend. I don't know why, but I
think it's a much better word to use. I really do. And that gets me into like pressure points, because is it pressure? Because pressure is a bad word. This gets into NLP in golf. Pressure, tension, fight, flight, negative, So would it be better to call them connection points? Because it's really not a ton of pressure that I'm trying to feel necessarily. It kind of depends, but I guess everyone's a little bit different. But when I see, those great players setting up, Sam Snead, Nicholas Hogan, there's some movement going on. The club's never just resting like dead weight on the ground and then they pick it up.
Yeah.
It's always kind of like there's always a real light touch with the club on the ground. But simultaneously, I don't see a lot of regripping and, indecision in the hands. It looks like these guys know exactly how to hold this thing.
Yeah.
So I think that older generation of just, more people willing to work on grip posture setup, and get things really set up well.
For people like, and there's a lot of coaches out there, right, Alex, that just don't touch grip. And I spend, there's not many people that get through me without me talking about their grip. I think people really underestimate the value of and how easy it is when you know what you're talking about to help someone with their grip. Like when you know what you're talking about, it's fucking easy. But if you don't know what you're talking about, it's difficult. And the amount of times I've worked with a student and I get frustrated at myself where I'll go, oh, fuck it, I'll just change the grip. And I fix it and they go, oh, that was amazing. I go, fucking hell. Stop listening to people and just jump on the grip. Because as soon as I do it, because people, okay, all right, I'm going to explain this very easily. is if you do something well, it feels good, right? Now, if I put your grip in a good position and you hit good shots, it'll feel good because you've hit good shots, right? But if your grip's in the wrong positioning, hit bad shots and it feels bad. Does that make sense, Alex? So the people say, "Oh, it takes a while to feel good." It shouldn't, because you'll flush the first few and it will feel good. so, um, but it might take time to become normal and under pressure, but it should feel good straight away once you get it. Do you kind of see what I'm talking about there?
Yeah, yeah, and it's tricky. Obviously, getting into hands and because everyone's gonna have different feels, you know, transferring energy out distally to your limbs and your hands and your joints and um,
I'm definitely gonna have some people that are gonna completely disagree with me there. And don't get me wrong, I don't touch every single fucking grip, but if I've got a guy struggling with the lefts, right, and his club face is super sharp, top of the backswing at P4, can see it's looking up towards the sky, and he's got this right hand that's super far underneath, which we know is going to move the trail hand into extension, right? And he's just going to have this thing looking up like that. Have I got a better chance to try and teach him to get 35 degrees open with his chest and get his left hip super open to try and get that club face somewhat square? Or have I got a better chance to get this recreational golfer with a more neutral face to match what he can physically do with his body? You know what I mean? Like, what have I got a better chance of doing? Like, do I need to get him like DJ through impact to try and match that grip? Or am I just going to get the grip to match how his body moves?
yeah, yeah. You know, the way I think about grip, because I, when I'm gripping, like if I'm gripping a weight and moving a weight, like yeah, my hands and my fingers are kind of the connection point, but I'm really trying to set up these other joints as well. You know,
Mm,
my wrist joints, my elbows, my shoulders, all the muscles in my shoulder girdle. If I'm trying to move some weight, you know, yeah, my hands are the connection to the weight, but what I'm really concerned about are my joints. So to me, I think there's an argument to be made for a perfect grip from an anatomical perspective based on where my wrist joints are the most pliable and the most stable. You know, if I get this,
100%.
if I think of the grip as like trying to get my wrist joints as neutralized as I can.
Yeah.
Because from a neutral position, I got the best range of motion.
Well, you can't,
Then I
that,
accelerate and
that,
decelerate well.
but that's how you're gifted, right? You're gifted for your wrist to work more in that kind of, let's call it like thumbs up, right? That's what the strongest point. You try and tell me where you're struggling to keep the club top of the backswing with some decent width that you want, and you got a dodgy grip. You're trying to tell me that you're trying to grab a bag, in the palm of your hand. You're picking up my GC quad bag. I use an example all the time. I'm gripping in my fingers, right? I'm always picking stuff up in my fingers to activate my wrist to move properly. In my opinion, right? And I know there's a lot of dodgy grips out there that have gone really successfully. But I think for the recreational golfer, if you can just keep that club face in somewhat of an alignment to be somewhat square, fuck, you got a better chance of delivering it the way you want to deliver it. You know what I mean? If you're highly skilled, of course, you can work with something. That's just,
Well, and the factor is you always kind of in the back of your head go, my connection to the golf club is not that good. I should probably work on this, but I don't want to, you know? So then it kind of lingers. So then,
yeah.
yeah,
And you know
yeah.
what? Most people that are too worried to change grips are too busy worrying about fucking ground forces anyway. You know what I mean? So I don't know if I'm swearing too much, but anyways, that's me. A bit of a rant there, but don't get me wrong, I don't change everyone, but don't know when we went through all that, but try to take away the grip and the connection to the club. But I just think people really underestimate how much a grip change can change someone's golf game. I'm not saying you change every
Yeah.
single person's grip.
Okay. A little strong, a little weak, but
Yeah.
then what's too much? What's not enough? What ranges are we trying to stay in? And, you know,
Yeah, I just think it just gets, yeah, I don't know. I think the connection to the club thing, I get it. I just think it's a little bit over in my experience. In my experience, no studies, but I think it's a little bit overdone a little bit. Like most people that you talk to, the recreational golfer, haven't been open to that terminology and don't understand about it. So they're not that emotionally attached to the grip. They're just holding the club. They're not like,
Right.
this is my only connection to the club. Mate, this is a 24 handicapper that just wants to get the ball down the fairway, right? He's never
Right.
studied about that. So in my experience, that when I've gone to change it and they hit a few shots and they go, oh, that was good. And I go, oh, thank God. But they weren't going through that experience because they haven't been told that it's such a big thing to change. Anyways,
Right. Right.
um, talk to me about, hopefully you got time still, but talk to me one more technical thing and I'll ask you some questions. Uh, I want to share a very simplistic view from taking the club from left arm level to the ground in the backswing P3 to the top of the backswing P4. How simple is it? And can you tell me? As in what's happening? What can you explain to me?
That's one of the trickiest parts of the swing, I feel.
It's tricky, but explain it to me in simple terms.
Well, so if I'm at left arm parallel, I'm going to have this alignment, somewhere around
So
90-ish. I
left arm in the shaft, 90 to 100,
yeah,
around there.
yeah, I would maybe err a little bit wider than
Yeah,
90, but
yeah, I would.
just keep a round number there, somewhere around 90. So then how do I keep that alignment from running off too much,
Yeah,
And then another reason to maybe look at the V on the right hand as an important part of this, because if I can support the cradle of the golf club up there nice because I got a good right hand grip, then I might have some control over it up here because you're dealing with the effect of centrifugal force in all these corners.
yeah,
So if I'm at left arm parallel, and let's say my left arm and the club shaft are about 90, let's say my right arm's about 70 degrees bent. So I'm going to basically try to bend my right elbow 20 more degrees as I'm also losing my middle pressure point without changing the angle in my left wrist.
yes,
And that's a tricky part of the swing because I feel like once this gets past 90, gravity kind of starts pulling the club head down a little bit.
yeah,
And I think you get some different reactions up here also based on what club you're hitting. So like a longer golf club, I might want to, have a little different reaction here. I might let this go a little bit more and then create a more acute angle here and then have to get it out a little earlier in the downswing sequence. But if it's like a wedge or a shorter iron, my distal muscle activity is basically done at P2.5, and I'm just
yeah,
continuing to coil my, rib cage and, retract my right shoulder and bend my right arm, but my hands aren't really doing anything sort of in that second half of the backswing. So I like, kind of the Rory split grip drill type feels up
yes,
there in that corner of the backswing. And I feel like it's tricky because you're keeping pressure against the left thumb as you continue to bend the right elbow, and you're continuing to stretch the arc out simultaneously, at that region of the swing. Because if you can keep it wider here, then when you change direction, you can get it to drop before you unload it.
100%.
Uh,
But so what you were saying there, like you're mentioning some things that are potentially happening, but from a numbers point of view, if we're drawing, which obviously the golf swing's not a game of numbers, right? But if you can master the P3 to P9, right? So if you can really get that club under immense control into P3 through doing thousands of reps, you're going to have that left arm or that lead arm and that shaft at, let's just call it 90 because it's a clean number. Right arm's at like 120, shoulders are turned, well, chest is turned 70. If you extend out your spine and finish your rotation to 90 degrees with your chest, allow that right arm to fold to 90 as you slightly lift your arms, and that's it.
yeah,
That's a numbers
yeah,
perspective. Obviously,
yeah,
stuff's going on, but
right.
to me, what also happens from 3 into 4, as you're extending that spine, you're also recentering and moving back towards a flag, right?
I, I kind of see the zeroing out of the thoracic kind of coming through the retraction of that right shoulder blade. And I think that's the part of the swing where you kind of have to keep the pressure against your left thumb while you continue to bend the right elbow to get that right scap to kind of zero out
Yeah.
the the shoulder blade. So
Yeah, I get you. Right,
um,
right, like right pec up towards the sky. Is the feeling, is that what you'd say?
yeah, just the right shoulder blade's kind of moving toward the spine, and then on this side, because my right arm's pushing into my left thumb, it's kind of taking these muscles on the left side of my back kind of away from my spine.
Yeah.
So I see kind of the zeroing out of the thoracic kind of coming from, maybe a little bit of retraction and kind of protraction in the lead shoulder a little bit, because at the top of the backswing, I feel like this shoulder's a little bit external and retracted. This one's a little bit internal and protracted. And then as I'm coming down, P4 to P5, the lower body's kind of already started its movement. So the hips, let's say at the top of the backswing, get the shoulders to 90 and the hips to 45. Well, as the hips go back to 0, the shoulders are going to respond to the movement of the hips.
Yeah.
P4 to P5. So they're going to start opening up.
Yeah.
But they don't start uncoiling until you start getting the left arm really coming off the chest and the right arm straightening out. So that sequence in transition is really important, I feel, because that's where I think the key word there is just to kind of be patient and let things kind of unfold properly, because all I really feel in my arms from P4 to P5 is, the left arm's maybe slightly starting off the chest, the right arm pressure points are reattaching, and then the right arm starts to straighten out, left arm starts to come off the chest, because I need my hand speed to be peaking around P5 and a half.
I tell you,
So
I tell you
yeah,
one way, we talk about the word being patient there from, top of the backswing P4 into P5, left arm level to the ground in the downswing, is I just use this terminology. Think about, I reckon backswing and downswing has ruined the golf terminology. I shouldn't say ruined it, sorry, but hasn't helped. If you think about swinging to P5 as a loading phase and everything else is an unloading phase, that
yeah,
teaches that person to be patient. So as they're going into the top of their backswing into 4, they're going up and then they're just being patient and coming into 5 and just
yeah,
coming into 5. Like, I think that kind of terminology, just getting back into 5, they're coming back down to the earth. Their
yeah,
arms have just started changing direction,
yep,
and then it's an unloading phase.
yep,
So when people see, like, they go, oh, the smooth swings of Freddie Couples and Ernie Els, they're just super good at wading into 5. That's all.
right,
Or sorry, that's all, but that's what I see, is they're super
100,
good at wading and they go. Ernie Els is like the number 3 guy on tour at one point, and people think he's just swinging it like he's just woken up. There's speed there, man. There's speed.
yeah. That's where, and you've got it fully loaded at 5. So I would say that's where you're trying to get to, and then from there it's just unload, pop, and lean back a little bit, and
And,
you're kind of trying to ride with it.
and
I always feel
yeah,
like when I go from if I get this thing really loaded at 5, then I'm trying to get it back out pretty quickly,
yeah.
back to 6.5, and then from 6.5, it's all riding together around here. So I'm basically trying to like get it loaded and then get it back out and then catch it with my extension and ride with it around that corner.
Yeah, and I think as well is that when you're managing someone around left arm level to the ground in the downswing, I think it's the first place you should look at any golfer, because you're about to the identity of the shot is pretty much shown at that point in time, right? Where you can learn as well is that if someone can handle a certain amount of narrowness at 5 or not. I think people definitely overdo coming into lead arm level to the ground and trying to be too narrow, and they just don't have the time or the speed to unload it quick enough into the ground, therefore kind of
Right,
dragging that handle. And I reckon
right,
if you can get someone, I think it's a really good, not only a point where we spoke previously around managing someone at lead arm level to the ground and managing their shot, their swing path or their swing direction, but you can also manage the width a little bit better on how much that player can kind of handle and how much speed they can carry, on how quickly their trail arm can unload into the ball. Do you kind of agree there too? Because some people are fast, some people aren't fast.
Yeah, and I think that's another argument for, developing a good grip from your wrist perspective.
Mm. Yeah, yeah.
You get more options.
Grip doesn't matter though, mate. That's what they say. Anyways, and it's no coincidence that one of the best golf grips of all time is Tiger Woods, right?
Yeah.
It's no coincidence.
Well, especially at certain, especially, kind of that 2000, 2001, 2002, around that time. Yeah.
I tell you what.
But yeah, I mean, you hear Tiger, he always said, I wasn't worried because I knew I had good hands.
Mm,
So it's like, no matter what, I can figure this thing out. Just, I got good hands.
yeah, Mickelson, Spieth, all great hands. All right, extra questions. Non-golfy type of stuff or can be golfy stuff. I've got 3 questions for you. Actually, one's golf question. I'm going to start
Okay.
this trend. Does the club control the body or the body control the club?
Well, I mean, without my body, the club would just be sitting here.
Yes. Yes, I like it. No, I do like it. I've just seen I've seen a forum that I've read in regards to like momentum at the club. You know what I mean? So if you've lost momentum and say you get, I use example for the last podcast, you get flat through 3, right? And you start seeing that shoulder cut pulled up really high. Like, so as that, let's say that lead forearm has overpronated into 3, that club or like laying down horizontally,
Yep.
then that left shoulder comes high. Is that left shoulder coming high because of the club, or is that club there because the shoulder's there or pronated? Like, you know what I mean? Like momentum starting to shift. So I think we see some certain aspects of the golf swing where, yes, the club moves from the body, but B, I think the incorrect orientation of that club throughout the body can sometimes take the body offline. Do you see where I'm coming from
Right.
there?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's where when you talk about braking mechanisms, like, I don't want to see any bobbling going on. So that when I see a really good golf swing and they stick the finish and there's no wobbling and no searching for balance, then I think that they were in harmony with the weight in motion, you
Interesting.
know? Versus, because one thing I always look at is the left foot at the finish of the golf swing. What's going on the left foot? That kind of tells me, whether or not they were in harmony with the weight.
Interesting. So the body controls the club. That's what you're saying.
I would say, since it's an inanimate object, yes. But if your club's starting to control your body, then we got to get things in balance. It's like, and it's not like you need a new swing. It's like just got to tighten the screws a little bit or get things in better alignments. So that the race car gets around the racetracks properly.
Just a throwaway question. I spoke to Andreas Carly about this. Jordan Spieth, right? One of the best, a great player, right? And a phenomenal junior and a phenomenal amateur. Mentally a different beast as well, especially what he did when he won that PJ Tour event when he was like, I don't know, I'm going to say 19 or something, right? I don't know how old he was. He was young. And the interview after, Alex, they said, were you nervous over that bunker shot? He held that bunker shot to get in the playoff. And he said, no, I needed to hole it to get into the British Open. Well, the Open the next week. I'm going, you're a freak, right? You're a different beast of a human. When Jordan Spieth was going through that troubles of, I'm going to say 20 to 21, and Cameron McCormick is a fantastic golf coach, right? Obviously coaches many, many tour players. How hard do you think it was for him to not touch his grip? Or do you think it was easy? Because he was a super good player and people talking about him losing the club at the top of the backswing, but he shot like 59, 100 times,
Right. Right. Well, that grip, that grip had already won majors though,
Exactly. But imagine, but there's also the argument of how good could it be if the grip wasn't, if you had Tiger's grip?
Yeah, that's a tricky one, man.
You'll never know. You'll never know. You'll never know.
And it comes down to, what does this player need at this moment in time? Because all the factors that go into not playing well, it could be a lot of things, and I think oftentimes we look to just change technique when maybe some other things might be off, you know?
Yes.
Um,
That's causing technique to be off.
well, and then you try to, you just try to change your technique because, well, you're going through some stuff. So it's like maybe you're had a bad breakup, or maybe
Yeah.
you this, or maybe that. It's like,
Yeah.
and that's why I'm kind of talking about the make decisions when you're in the right resonance type of idea. Because if you're making decisions sort of haphazardly while you're frustrated, or the coach player relationship starting to get more egoic,
Yeah.
I'm right, you're wrong, I'm right, you're wrong, this is your fault, this is, then that stuff starts going on, then, relationships can break up, and maybe they should. Maybe it's time to go hear a new perspective. But oftentimes I think people try to change things that, from a technique perspective, they're always trying to look at changing technique. Well, what if you go see someone like Paul Chek and get your diet under control,
Yeah.
see energy changes, and see if your thoughts change from your energy changing. I mean, yeah, I don't know.
No, interesting. Anyways, I just thought it would just be that would go through the head at night would be like, it wasn't wrong before. Why is it wrong now? Type of situation, and anyways, it's just an interesting thing. I've never been in that perspective or in that position, um, as a golf coach, coaching an absolute world beater and a beast, and just done some incredible things. Like Jordan Spieth's done some of the most amazing things I've ever seen on the golf course. You know what I mean? Like on how he's been able to win, and then go, what, getting this guy out of this funk. Like you're saying, obviously
Well,
extra stuff, but
yeah, yeah. I remember when I was at I played in a tournament down in El Paso. There's the All American event every year, and Spieth was there, his freshman year. So I think, a senior, and Spieth was a freshman at Texas. And Spieth was kind of rallying everybody to go out. He had a fake ID,
oh no
so
way.
he was 18 or 19, but he was getting everybody to go out. And we went out one night, and we're at a bar and talking and drinking beers and having a good time. And
Yep.
uh, I'll never forget Jordan saying that he just needed to get a year of partying out of his system before he goes to the tour. So I
Wow.
remember, because he was like U.S. Junior champ Jordan Spieth, and like good player at
Yeah.
Texas and stuff. He wasn't like Jordan Spieth yet,
Yeah.
But I'll get the way he said it. It was like, yeah, I just wanted to get a year of this out of my system before I go to the tour. Because it wasn't like, I hope I'm going to go to the tour. It wasn't like, it was like, no, I did this on purpose.
Doesn't, like, I got goosebumps there, right? Thinking about that, because I've heard someone say that, Alex, about every great player. Like, not every great player, but I've heard that so many times. And I've heard things when people have said something and just gone, you're talking about that thinking in part A of this podcast series, right? We're talking earlier about that thinking. Like, he knows he's going to be on the PGA Tour and contending and winning. He knows it. Like he's saying there, like, oh, I shouldn't be out partying because, I'm trying to get in the PGA Tour. It's like, I'm going to get this done because when I'm out there, I'm over it. Like,
Yeah.
and you hear that and you don't forget that type of stuff, do you, Alex? Like, you've had millions of conversations, but that has sat with you like a true champion. People have
Yep.
often heard me share on this podcast. I won't share it again about some of the stuff I heard Cam Smith say, and throwaway stuff. And you actually, you start to learn and believe, like, wow, you are different. You know what I mean? Like, you are so different. That's crazy.
Well,
Yeah,
and the way
that's such a great story. Thanks for sharing that. It's awesome.
the way he said it was just matter of fact. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it wasn't arrogant. It wasn't cocky. It was just like, this is what I'm doing.
Yeah. But he just knew. He just knows. I love that. I love that. All right, 2 more questions. Best advice you've ever received and the worst advice you've ever received.
Wow.
I should have asked you earlier. You can take your time.
Best advice I've ever received. Wow, that's a big question.
Well, something that you think that you have received. Don't have to very top tier it, but what's really good advice that you can think of? And
Man, nothing,
nothing coming to
nothing.
mind?
Wow. I'm thinking of my granddad.
Yes.
He's the one who got me into golf. He was the one that I hung out with a lot, spent a lot of time with on the golf course. His love for the game of golf really inspired my love for the game of golf and the connection to the game of golf. And I'm thinking of just how patient he was, how kind he was, how respectful he was on the golf course, what a gentleman he was. So I guess I just spending time with him and seeing, because he was a World War II veteran. He got shot down in Germany and was in a prisoner of war camp for 18 months and
Wow.
all kinds of experiences. But just how he was with people, how he was with his wife and his children and his family, and how he was on the golf course, and you know, play the ball as it lies. I guess that's probably the best advice I would say I've
No,
ever gotten. And yeah, play
that's nice.
play lies kind of thing.
And I know that you're a golf nut as we kind of close this up, right? And you got a lot of respect for the game of golf, and you're a historian of the game of golf. Like you got a lot of passion for the older golfers, and you pay a lot of respect to them, and you pay a lot of respect to the traditions of the golf, which I love to as well. Like I often always make sure I've got my traditional type of golf shoes on, and I still love that aspect of golf for me. Wearing a polo, tucking it in, all that type of stuff is still golf to me, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I want to ask your opinion. What do you think of the Waste Management Phoenix Open? Like a lot of people, it was about to happen this week. A lot of people love this golf tournament, and I kind of cringe at it, to be honest with you, to a degree. Like I don't. I know people having fun. I don't have a problem with anyone having fun, right? You're allowed to have fun. You can do whatever the fuck you want. I've got the word freedom tattooed on my arm because you can do whatever you want, right? But to me, it's not my level of fun. Like we've had the live golf here in Adelaide, and everyone's like, "Oh, come here." It's just I love it. I love live. I love everything that's going on. I love the people that's attracting to the game, but it's just not golf to me. I'm assuming you might share the same thought. I love golf. I
Yeah.
shouldn't say that. Sorry. Before I cut you off there. I fucking love live and everything it's done for the game of golf. Right. I love it. I absolutely love it. I have no problem. I've been barracking for it. We need more tours. We need a lot more tours. But I don't know. I just think the Waste Management Phoenix Open, it's not like my favorite one that I get really excited for watching to see if someone shows up with their shirt off on the putting green. You know what I mean?
Right.
Anyways, that's from
Yeah,
me.
it's all very, I don't know, it's all very kind of Roman, kind of vibe, like the
Coliseum stuff. Yeah, I get it.
Colosseum, that kind of, entertain the peasants. I don't know.
Interesting. No, that's fine.
I guess materialism, maybe that's the term.
I understand. No, I understand. And I don't want to shit anyone who enjoys a tournament. I just, yeah, just give me watching the traditional game of golf down the 18th hole. You know what I mean? Like just watching some proper golf. I love it. I love it. All right, mate, Alex, you've been great. All the stuff's going to show. This is 2 episodes that we've published today. This is Puppy. I appreciate it for all the time you've given us. We had a bit of technical difficulties early on. Everyone can get you. All the stuff will be down below to get you for a lesson and on all your socials. You're always popping out some really cool point of difference stuff. And we really appreciate you coming on the Golf Coach podcast, mate.
Thanks, Toby. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, dude. Thanks, Alex.